Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co-host, Nick Olson. Nick, how are we doing today?
Oh, we are excited. We are pumped. We had Kirk Cousins dropping bomb after bomb. Monday Night Football, primetime Kirk Cousins victory over the best, arguably, and I would argue the best team in the NFL. Very satisfying win, very encouraging win. Didn't feel like it was a cheap win. Felt like, yes, this is a team that, we had kind of said they had gotten on some bad breaks between the recovery luck, all the other things that kind of like didn't go their way, all the one score losses this year, Justin Jefferson on IR, and then for them to come out and put up a show like that in a game where they honestly could have scored even more points and really had put the game away. It was a very, very satisfying win. So excited to get in with you. Hopefully they keep it rolling through Sunday against the Packers. Matt, how you been?
Yeah, no, awesome. Glad to be back on here with you. I mean, last week on this podcast, I did it solo, and I was extremely pessimistic about the Vikings' chances against the Niners, right? I just didn't see who they were as a team coming together. And I think everything on the offensive side of the ball in this game came together towards the Vikings' success. Or I should say, not everything on the offensive side of the ball. I guess we'll get into the run game a little bit, but just the Vikings played a complete team football game, which might be the first time we've done that, I feel like, in the Kevin O'Connell era. Like maybe the Packers game week 1 last year might have been the best one. I guess technically you could say the Bears game week 18 or whatever last year, but that Bears team wasn't an NFL football team, so I don't really count that as much. It really, to me, felt like the most complete football game this Vikings team has played under Kevin O'Connell. So, with that, we're super excited to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Kirk Cousins, I think, is the headline, right? Top one performance for Kirk Cousins as a Viking, like top three at
It's up
least, I
there.
would have to think. I mean, that's obviously some recency bias creeping in there, but like this was just an absurd game from Kirk. Even though he had an interception, even though he maybe should have thrown a second interception, on that Addison touchdown, like even considering that he had like three bad plays in this game, right? Out of 45 dropbacks, like he was just awesome.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Um, the accuracy was there. Really a handful of things, but I thought the anticipation in this game was just as good as it gets from any NFL quarterback. This was Brady level anticipation in this game. And the processing and the vision. I mean, that throw he made in the fourth quarter where there was a naked keeper, like a boot, and the edge defender is screaming right down at him, completely unblocked, and it's naked, and he's not going after the back because the run action's the other way. He's coming straight at Kirk, and for Kirk to just be like, yeah, okay, my first read isn't there. I'm going to come back and hit the crosser on the other side. Like to be able to just do that. Well, I feel like the Kirk Cousins of the past dirts that 10 out of 10 times, or like we're lucky to not have that be a sack, but for him to like move off his first read and get to his second read, and then it's not only see that read, but to be able to get the ball out, having to throw it like without being able to step into the throw, like kind of off your back foot a little bit, and then to hit it, and he drills. I think it was KJ
It was
Osborne
KJ,
right
yeah.
between the 1 and the 7. And that was just one of like you could go through another dozen plays. I'm sure we will, but like that kind of stuff, the anticipation and the vision and the ability to move through his progressions. I mean, there were red zone plays where he got to the fifth guy in his progressions. So really exceptional stuff from Kirk. The pocket presence, he was moving in there. Shout out to the offensive line for not giving up a single sack against an elite defensive line. But part of that was Cousins was moving very well in the pocket too. He kind of just always knew where to go with the ball, throwing with an exceptional amount of anticipation. Every ball kind of seemed like, wow, that was just O'Connell called up the perfect play for this occasion, and Cousins executed it perfectly. So,
Yeah.
like you said, they were firing on all cylinders. Really, really encouraging stuff from Kirk. If he plays like this the rest of the season, well, one, they're not going to be a losing team for very long. Two, you're going to have a hard time saying like, how do we move on from this guy? Because this is NFL quarterback. As far as I'm concerned, that was about as good as it gets from an NFL quarterback. So I can only say very high praises for Kirk after that game.
Yeah, absolutely. The anticipation 100% stands out. And the thing that gets me is he was doing it to Powell, right? Like the whole game, or at least the second half really is when Powell kind of showed up quite big. But like he's throwing these big comebacks in critical situations with heavy anticipation to Brandon Powell, our third receiver who Kirk probably doesn't get a lot of play with in practice, right? On a typical week because we have Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne and Jordan Addison, and they had the lion's share of the snaps before JJ got hurt, and Kirk is just trusting this dude to win every single time, and he does it. Like it was really impressive there. The wrap in, or the in where he got it just over Greenlaw's hand, right? I think everybody saw that from, probably it was on the, I think it was highlighted on the broadcast, but it's also great from the end zone angle on all 22, where it's like Kirk has to throw that ball as soon as Fred Warner turns his hips. That's an anticipation throw as well. Like it, and again, it's Brandon Powell who he hits on that play. Like the level of trust that Kirk had in every single facet of the offense in this game, and the fact that the rest of the offense paid that off, was really, really impressive from a passing perspective in the game. I even want to say like the Jordan Addison touchdown that maybe should have been an interception or whatever. Like, hey, it's third and whatever on, with 16 seconds left. The worst case scenario with an interception is probably they get it and they kneel it, right? So I think taking that deep shot and having that trust there works. The interception at the beginning of the game, I think, is very much on Addison for not winning that route. You look at it, the Vikings have a screen called to the other side. So basically, it's a numbers play, right? If the 49ers send numbers to the 4x1 screen, then you have to throw the slant. Like Kirk has no other options or no other outlets on that play. It's a man coverage beater. A slant should be a man coverage beater, automatic every time for a receiver. And Addison just gets out physical. We're gonna talk about Addison later, right? We'll table him a little bit for now, but I don't put the blame for that interception on Kirk. Frankly, I think it's squarely on Addison's shoulders for not making that at least an incomplete pass, right? Kirk's pocket movement was absolutely absurd in this game too. There was one of the comebacks that he threw with anticipation. Powell was great pocket movement, steps up violently, resets his feet, gets the throw off. But that last third down, where it was another completion to Addison, and great design by Kevin O'Connell on this route as well. Like Addison's running a slant that turns into an outbreaking route on a play that's typically triple slants from the offense, right? I watched this game. I wrote an article on Kirk that's coming out on Zone Coverage Thursday morning, right? I wanted to do that completely blind to the JT O'Sullivan video that came out. As I was waiting for us to record this, I popped on the JT O'Sullivan video because I figured I might as well get it done and get it in. So he's the one who clued me onto that. Fantastic video if you guys want to watch it. Read my article first. You'll notice we say basically the exact same things about Kirk Cousins in this football game because he was just absolutely dealing. So, the pocket movement on Kirk on that play, he gets hit from both sides. Granted, it's his own guys, right? It's Brian O'Neill and Dalton Risner, so that's why it's not a sack. But he gets hit by them, sustains, holds onto the football, keeps his head, and makes the play down the field. Now, Addison won so well on that route that even if Kirk gets sacked, it's still a penalty because of the holding on the defense while the quarterback's in the pocket. But, just bonkers pocket movement all game from Kirk. The willingness to stand in there, take hits, make throws under duress from Kirk. It's something we've always talked about as a positive of his. I think this year, up until this point, like there's been a timing aspect that's been a little bit off, where Kirk's been a little bit late and he's kind of hanging there maybe a little split second too long. In this game, the timing was 1,000,000% perfect. So I loved it.
Yeah, and two other things I want to shout out. One, the aggression. I feel like Kirk was pushing the ball down the field a lot. I mean, there were a lot of design throws, short too as well, and screens as well. But he was not checking things down. Well, there was one example. It was like the four verts or the double stick nods in the 2-minute drill, where he checked it down. And that was kind of a bad decision because
I was so mad at that play.
Drain 20 points off the clock. Obviously, we're not talking about it because of Addison's touchdown, but that was a poor decision in my opinion, and in JT O'Sullivan's, for what it's worth, not just me, to check that one down there. But I'm calling that one out because it's the exception. I mean, that third down to like TJ Hockenson, like with where he chips Bosa and then runs up a little seam route. That, stuff like that where, he was pushing the ball down the field. And I think that's kind of, they came out of the game converting well over half of their third downs. And a big part of it was, outside of very rare exceptions, Kirk was not checking the ball down. There was one other time where he hit like a stick China route underneath, but it set up a long field goal, so it worked out anyway. And the 49ers were taking away like Kirk could not have gone farther downfield. So he was pushing the ball down the field. I'd like to see that kind of aggression from him. And the last thing I would shout out is his command at the line of scrimmage was very, very impressive. It reminded me of like Philip Rivers, just like extremely active at the line, or like Dak
Yes.
Prescott, who's also like very, very good and active at the line of scrimmage. And part of this, I'm sure, was defensive play calling. I mean, whoever was out there padding every 49ers defensive play call over the year, like give that guy a raise, because I think they kind of had the 49ers defense figured out. I mean, the
I
way
I
we'll get into it
100%
when we
do.
talk about well, we'll get into it when we talk about the schemes, but the way they were motioning the back from one side to the other as a man zone tell, the way they were moving guys into and out of stacks to be able to like get the 49ers to check into specific coverage calls, and Cousins to be able to see all that, deploy all of that, and use that to be like, okay, I think the coverage is going to be this, and that means I'm going to be able to go here with the ball, and if that's not open, I'll be able to go to the here, or I think it's zone, but in case it's not zone, here's my man beater on the other side. Like it was just like I mentioned Brady-esque, and it was just one game, so I don't want to get too carried away. But like that level of processing pre-snap and post-snap, and Kirk's ability to sort of be like a mastermind at the line of scrimmage was also very, very impressive, creative, led to a very, very effective day against. We said at the top, but it bears repeating. They were down Justin Jefferson. I mean, Cousins was throwing to Tristan Jackson, Brandon Powell. And this was up against the best defense in the NFL, or, one of them, if maybe the Browns, if you want to quibble. But 49ers are right up there. And Cousins was doing this without Justin Jefferson. It's just extremely impressive stuff.
Yeah.
So hats
So
off to Kirk. A very well earned Monday Night Football performance.
yeah, so two plays stuck out to me on that Kirk's command at the line of scrimmage thing. The first was the very first play of the game where he's up there, he's calling everything out, and then he cans the play. It's outside zone. It hits for 19 yards, right? It's like, all right, this is the look we want. We're going to be able to hit this run, and they got it, right? The second one was the Cam Akers screen after a great double pass design, right? We can talk about, we're going to hop into the designs in a second. But, after that didn't work, whatever, you get the KJ Osborne to 3rd and 10. They call the perfect screen. I think Kirk checked into that and noticing the blitz, noticing the pressure coming from that side, because it's just too perfect, hitting the weak side linebacker, the safety from that side, both blitzing, and you throw a screen into that. Literally, Bradbury and Ingram were out there to block. There was nobody within 10 yards of them for them to block. They had to go past the sticks before they made contact with the defender because of how well the Vikings timed that screen call. And I think it maybe it was an actual call on the field, but maybe it was a check too, because Kirk motions TJ in and then he's saying something to everybody on the line. He takes a step up and makes some sort of call, whether that's a protection thing, whether that's, getting it 100% right. I don't know, but I think it's probably a check from Kirk there. So just great command of the line of scrimmage. And again, that's something we've talked about. Like, the Vikings so far this season have not had great hot answers for some of the blitzes that we've seen, right? They've abandoned having hot answers, or they've abandoned having solutions for blitzes, and Kirk's kind of been left for dead on those plays. So to see him be able to make those changes in this game and execute on that, and the offense execute on that, I think was great.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, you mentioned that screen was on 3rd and 10, I believe, to convert.
Yeah.
The play before it was 2nd and 24. My favorite thing about that screenplay is it managed to convert a series where we are at one point 2nd and 24. I mean, that's give up territory for
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins typically. That's I'm gonna throw my little slant flat or whatever for 5 yards, and then like just accept the fact that I'm going to be punting the ball. And instead, on 2nd and 24, he chucks a very long developing comeback route. I think it was to
That was KJ.
to Osborne. Yeah, Osborne comes back for it. Kirk takes a big hit there, but on 2nd and 24 to be like, I'm going to hang in here. I'm going to chuck it deep. I'm not giving up on this series. That's the kind of aggression I'm talking about. Where I was very. That's like, yes, that's what you want to see. 2nd and 24, no problem. Let's go. We'll go get our first down. So, and then to top that playoff, the deep comeback that gets you 15 yards or whatever with a screen that's perfectly called into the blitz. That was just, everything was clicking. So it was great to see.
Yeah, because we had like two consecutive penalties there, right? It was like a holding and then the offensive
And then
pass
the double
interference.
screen that got called back on OPI.
And it's like you're in what you're at like the 30 for firmly in field goal range, and you're like, oh no, we gotta work just to get back into field goal range. Like there's no way we're converting this series of downs, and then it ends up becoming, well, we kicked a field goal anyway, but uh, but so let's flip it over to the play calling side of the ball, which I thought was just as on fire as Kirk. Like Kevin O'Connell was in his bag. You mentioned one of my favorite plays to get the team going, that TJ Hockenson 3rd and 12 conversion, right? So the Vikings first drive get a nice chunk gain. Are looking on the run play, are looking kind of interesting. On a second down play, we throw that interception. Next drive, we get the fumble, which was great on defense, but the offense is backed up, right? 2 negative plays, 3rd and 12. You're like, oh no, here we go again. This Vikings offense is just going to sputter out. And, it's part of it's using TJ Hockenson in a very TJ Hockenson way, right? Getting TJ Hockenson vertical after he's chipping. Part of it's knowing how your opponent plays, like that scouting you were talking about with the opponent scouting. Fred Warner is playing route combinations as a linebacker, right? He doesn't have his eyes on the quarterback. He's watching the route combinations to his side of the field. The Vikings know that Warner likes to do this. So getting a delay chip, getting vertical routes to that side of the field where Warner, I think, is kind of hunting for a dig coming in from the outside on maybe a dagger type of call, right? That's what he's kind of looking for. Addison runs to the outside. You get the delay from Hockenson. He's wide open over the middle, and he's got a head of steam to go down and get the first down. Like, I thought it was a great job of understanding how to manipulate what your opponent is going to do on the defensive side of the ball and how they're going to read your plays.
Yeah, I think my favorite call from the game, I mean, that was a great one to set up. Like, that was converted 3rd and 12, backed up in their own territory.
That
Like in
probably
their own
wasn't my
20.
favorite call from the game, but yeah, it's a great one.
That was that I just what I loved about that one was how easy the conversion was for like third and
Mm-hmm.
3rd and 12 again. That's give up territory, and instead that was just an easy conversion to Hockenson up the seam. My favorite one was the play that didn't even convert. It was the red zone throw to Mattison that he dropped,
Oh yeah.
and I thought the design there was so cool because they come out. Now, this was the one where it was set up by a QB sneak where they get inches, but they don't get enough to cross the goal line. And then there's the botched snap. So then the next one, they do a wide receiver screen, which I thought actually was another really well designed play by Kevin O'Connell in the low red zone because they use motion and the Niners are in zone. So they get themselves a numbers advantage. But they just aren't quite able to punch it in. The blocker, the
Mm-hmm.
defenders are able to sort of get past the blockers and force a stop short of the goal line, despite gaining like, I don't know, maybe 5 yards or something. So you're like on the 3 yard line or whatever. They come out immediately, tempo, quick snap it, and it's in a 4-by-1 where you have a bunch to the right side and you're one to the other side. And Addison lines up in the backfield. Madison's actually the number 3 to the bunch, and Addison is lined up in the backfield. But the defense doesn't have time to react to that because you're immediately getting to the line and snapping the ball. And what that bunch does is you have two defenders running. You kind of run mesh with the one to the left side running across her, and then the other two running the other mesh, and then the sort of sit route or sift route on top of it. So you have that mesh concept there, but the first read in the play is just a high-low concept where Hawkinson, the number 1 to the bunch side, is running a post route, and Addison's running a flat route.
Yep.
There's a lot of jargon, but just basically, you got a high-low stretch on the right side of the end zone. And I think it's a great way to set it up because Addison is getting sort of your fast to the flat route right there, where he gets like a quick start. He's your go-to guy to get it to the front pylon, and he gets 2 natural picks there, plus another defender over the top of him to stretch him. So I think Cousins probably could have fired that in there to the low red zone, but the play design is so well designed that like he doesn't have to like risk. The Niners defender ends up doing a good job mid-pointing the high-low and in such a way that like he probably could have had a chance to make either
It
those
makes the
contested.
read muddy for Kirk, and he just progresses beyond it. Yeah.
And he should because the play, like it's not like that was the only thing. Like the mesh concept also works very well. And if it were a man, the 49ers were playing man, you got the mesh, you got the pick there to throw that in there. Instead they were zoning it out. and Cousins, the way the mesh is supposed to work against zone is your defender is supposed to sit in the middle of the field where he finds a soft spot. So Cousins sees it, reads it, sees okay zone, so I'm going to find the soft spot, and that's exactly what he does. He throws it into the soft spot in between the linebackers. And Mattison just keeps running. He doesn't because he's a running back, I guess, and not a wide receiver. He doesn't really know that he really should have sat down. And so the
Yeah.
throw ends up behind him, and Madison's able to make a reaching grab behind him, but he drops it. It should have been a touchdown because it was just a really, really well designed. You don't see that often where you have like a 4-by-1 with a wide receiver lined up in the backfield, and it's so well set up for that to be your first read. And then to be able to come off that and be like, okay, I got answers if this is man. Okay, I got answers if this is a zone, but I'm not able to get to my number one. So I just really like that play design.
Yeah.
And I know it's frustrating that like the Vikings got to the low red zone twice and had to kick multiple field goals in those situations. Kevin O'Connell strangely doesn't go for fourth downs on it, but I was really encouraged when I turned on the tape and saw like just how well designed some of these red zone play calls were done. So I feel like that's a play that if they were able to run it again, they would get the touchdown most of those times. So
Well,
impressive stuff.
that's
I
kind
really
of the
like that.
thing with the Vikings low red zone. I don't think it's because of bad play design. I see people constantly complaining on Twitter about like the Vikings low red zone play design is like Kevin O'Connell's a terrible play caller there, and it's like, dude, first of all, watch last year where we were incredibly successful, but watch how many near misses we had on these plays. Even the first series where we ended up kicking a field goal, Kirk just misses Addison, who's wide open. He should have sat him down, and Kirk said that after the game. It's again one of the two of the like very minuscule blemishes on Kirk's game, right? Like he missed one throw. He actually had a great throw to Powell on the post that Warner tipped up. It's like just a fantastic play by one of the best linebackers in the game, right? So, or sorry, I think it was just a dig or an in route to Powell on the back line where Warner tipped it up. That was the play after he missed Addison. Like, so really, we probably should have had 2 touchdowns there in our 2 low red zone trips if just a little bit of a change in execution by some of the players. So, a great design. The other design I want to shout out, I mean, there were so many from Kevin O'Connell in this game, honestly, but the other design I want to shout out is the Addison third down conversion on the slant, right? The Vikings go into bunch. They see the Niners are playing man to the bunch. And I think this is something they're like, okay, we know the Niners are going to play man in these situations. We're going to go to the bunch and we're going to have this designer play to get it to work, right? So they motion Addison out of the bunch. Addison's the inside guy on the bunch. The point man's locked up on TJ Hockenson. When they motion Addison out, the guy who's inside on Addison moves over and goes into press man on Powell. So it's now TJ Hockenson and Powell are right next to each other, and Addison's out wide, out by the numbers. Because of how they were playing the bunch, the corner, it might have been Ward in this case, but a lot of times it was the other guy who was on this side of the field, is way off. So the Niners playing press, and you can't press 3 guys because you're just asking for guys to get picked off in that situation. You have to play at least one of the guys off. The Niners playing press, Powell goes vertical, Hockenson goes inside, he clears out that guy for the inside for Addison to follow through. Powell goes vertical and Addison runs his route vertical enough to keep the corner vertical and directly off of Powell, right? Directly underneath Powell, and he's just wide open with a massive amount of space. That's amazing play design by O'Connell to get that conversion. To get, like with the Hockenson one earlier, 2 like super easy third down conversions against one of the best defenses in the NFL, who I thought were playing at a pretty high level in this game. Like, I didn't think there were a lot of true coverage busts. It was a lot of Kirk being incredibly precise with the timing. Even one of the first plays of the game, he hits KJ Osborne on a dig, it was Addison on a dig. And Hufanga hits him like immediately, but Addison's able to hold on to the catch. Like, that timing was absolutely perfect, and I think the Vikings were just 100% on point. There was even the deep dagger play to KJ where Hufanga's like there and makes a tackle immediately, right? It's like the margin of error was 0 for the Vikings in this game, and they executed time and time and time again. So
Yeah, that's
I
part of
loved
what
it.
makes this victory so encouraging is like it's not like the Niners had like an off night. Like it's not like we'll talk about the pass protection, but it's not like Eric Armstead or Nick Bosa or like had bad nights. No, they're really good players. I mean, Bosa's the reigning defensive player of the year, and offensive line still managed to pitch a shutout, no sacks, and same thing with the wide receivers. Like TJ Hockenson was shaking Fred Warner out of his shoes. Like these are good players that they were beating, and they were beating them with skill, and they were beating them by just outsmarting them. I thought overall, just to put a bow on this Kevin O'Connell talk, like their use of motion was so great. I know a lot of people like pound the table, like just run more motion, just do what the Dolphins do, and it'll lead to a higher EPA per play as if it were that easy. It's not, but when you do use motion, you want there to be an intent behind it and something specific that you're using it for. Because defenses can use motion against the offense too. The offense can tip its hand by how it's motioning players, and so you don't want to just do motion for the sake of motion. But in this case, every single time, it was a lot of motion to a stack, or motion out of a stack, or motion the three in the stack to the one. And each of those times they were able, and that's what they did on that Addison third down conversion. That's also what they did with that TJ Hockenson. I think it was motioning out of a stack to get
Hmm.
not quite in line, but kind of like close to the line to chip Bosa. Um, a lot of these times, and we won't have to break it down because JT O'Sullivan does it, but on the Addison touchdown, the first one, that was also motioning to a stack to dictate a box coverage call from the 49ers, which was ultimately what enabled Addison to be able to split
Yeah.
the safety. Well-timed play design, but also to be able to motion into the stack and be like, we know that this is how the 49ers are going to play. I mean, this was kind of like a old shout out here, but like McVay versus Zimmer back in what was that 2017 or something, 2018, where he had to like go back to the
2018. Yeah.
drawing board. Yeah, that was kind of like this play. I feel like the 49ers after this game, one, they tip your cap to, man, that was a heck of a game from Kirk and company. But also, like, I think we got to go back and figure out our coverage calls a little bit because maybe we're a little bit predictable, got a little bit figured out. So, really like the intentional use of motion. It was used very effectively to make a lot of easy third down conversions, which ultimately I think were what carried the Vikings and allowed them to keep these drives moving. They scored on I think 6 of their 9 drives or whatever, and one of
Hmm.
them, was like a punt where they could have gone for it on fourth and medium or something, and one of those was maybe a kneel down. So like that was a very very efficient offensive night. I think a big part of it was just how well designed Kevin O'Connell, in his bag came to this game. So love to see it.
Yeah, so we shouted out Powell, we shouted out Hawkinson. I think both had great games. You saw with TJ Hawkinson what his athleticism does. The one play I wanted to shout out with him was a play action deep crosser that we hit pretty early in the game as well to him, and he chips on that play as well, gets vertical, and has Kirk sit him down over the middle of the field against a linebacker, makes a catch. It's a 20-yard chunk play, right? The one player, I mean, we've brought him up, we've talked about the plays, but Jordan Addison just had a phenomenal game. And breakout ESPN Jordan on Monday Night Football on ESPN, right? Like, just really cool moment for him. That first touchdown you mentioned, I thought, Addison's speed is what makes that play, right? Because is the safety closing in over top, and then there is the linebacker closing in underneath. And Addison has the quickness and the play speed to be able to just get there, and for Kirk to be able to put that ball exactly where he needs to. Now, he was pretty wide open by the time he caught the ball, but there are slower players in the NFL who aren't going to be able to get to that landmark in that time frame. But then the big touchdown, right? The 60-yard touchdown, just stealing the ball away from the guy. Redemption when you had the interception on you earlier in the game. Just really impressive stuff by Addison, I thought, and he deserves a lot of credit for how he played in this game. We've covered how he got open, kind of from some of the design stuff, but just shouting him out individually, like, he was great.
Yeah, I think this is the game that very clearly establishes him as a number one wide receiver in the NFL. And yeah, you saw his limitations on the first interception. Like, yeah, he got bodied a little bit, and he's got that physicality to work on. Still ended up having a great night, but yeah, that is something that he is can struggle with. But at the same time, I also thought I saw him win with physicality, especially on the fade
Hmm.
routes. I thought on both of those fade routes, like yes, he's got a great burst release or whatever to get upfield, and he sets himself up well. But also, it was really at the end of the route, it was an arm bar that he used to separate himself and create a little bit of extra space, a little bit of a one extra step on the guy ahead of him. And I thought on there was a time when he was able to draw. In addition to his like 100 plus yards, he was also able to draw like multiple penalties over the night, and I think part of that was why. And there was also one that I probably could have been called. It was a very close. The ref was a no call on one of those fade routes on the right sideline, where there wasn't like a grab of the arm, but Addison
Yeah.
had his arm tangled up with the guy behind him and wasn't able to get his other hand on the ball. I understand why they don't call that because it's just arm fighting. There's no clear grab, but I also think like, Tie goes to the home crowd in my opinion on that one. But
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
get you on
this
that.
was
But just a phenomenal game from him. Why don't we flip it over to something we haven't talked about so far in terms of the pass protection from the Vikings this game? I thought they were great. They kept, Kirk didn't get sacked in this game against a fearsome 49ers front that blitzed a lot. The early initial reports said that from PFF said that the 49ers didn't get pressure. Like on review, they said there was more pressure. And I think there was pressure against Kirk. We talked about how he navigated the pocket pretty well. But overall, everybody on the offensive line held up well. I think it was just a lot of blitzing that led to compressed pockets, right? You got a lot of bodies in there, so it's kind of hard to work with in some instances. There were individual losses by each of the linemen, right? Christian Darrisaw had a loss early on where Kirk Cousins ended up getting hit. I think that was actually the play before that 3rd and 13 conversion. Um, but overall, I mean, I didn't see a ton of blemishes, and it was kind of like every guy maybe had one, except I think Brian O'Neill was pretty clean. Sometimes it was like, oh, well, we're asking TJ Hockenson to block Nick Bosa. And yeah, Nick Bosa bull rushed him into Kirk, but Kirk also got the ball off and it was a completion at the same time, right? Like Hockenson gave him the time that he needed to do that. So I think it was a win across the board from pass protection in this game.
Yeah, no, I think this was one of those games where watching it live, it felt like the offensive line was like perfect. And I think part of that was just how good Kirk was under pressure. And you kind of mentioned it, but maybe just to put a gloss on it. A lot of these plays, like that one at the end, the slant go out route from Addison on that
Yeah.
last critical third down conversion. Like two guys, Reisner and Brian O'Neill got bull rushed into the quarterback, and Cousins was able to somehow pull a rabbit out of his hat and get that ball out of there. So, and Kirk was doing that all night. So you didn't really feel the effects of the pressure. Maybe Kirk did, but if he did, it didn't affect the results. But that's not to neg the offensive line because they were phenomenal. I mean, anytime if you go up against the 49ers and you come away with 50 pass attempts and 0 sacks, like that's insane. I would have been hard to believe if you had told me going into the game. And they got some help. They chipped on third downs with their CJ Ham and the tight ends in there. And they did their protection calls well, and the running backs adjusted to the things well, and they planned it out well. But also, guys, especially the two tackles, just put up really, really, really strong performances. So I thought Reisner, I had some quibbles with him, and he kind of had a performance where I was like, this is very quality depth. I also understand why Ezra Cleveland and Ingram are starting over him. So yeah, it was overall like a really encouraging stuff. I mean, anytime it's one thing to go up against the Bears and look very good. It's another thing to like go into the 49ers and be like, okay, so these metrics say, PFF grades us well, but how are we actually going to perform against a playoff caliber defensive line? And I think this game, one of the things that makes this game so encouraging for the Vikings moving forward is they went up against the best and they were the Vikings offensive line was better than the 49ers defensive line. That's a very, very encouraging win for the Vikings going forward.
Yeah, and one thing on Reisner too, I thought he played a very solid game. I don't really have much issue with Ezra Cleveland as a left guard, so I'm not gonna pound the table either way. And I think Ed Ingram has played a lot better this year. I think they are all valid options as in terms of a starter, but I love having three of them, so we have the depth at that position. One thing about Reisner, and I hope this comes out okay. Like every time I've tried to formulate the sentences in my head, it sounds condescending, but I don't mean it in that way. Is that Reisner, like very clearly, you can tell like on the tape that he wants to fit in and wants everybody to like him on the offense because he, after every snap, it felt like was running to the ball and picking the guy up who made the play. There was one very clear one on a Hockenson screen that he did it, which is just cool, right? Like I want that kind of team
Yeah.
player on my football team. So it was fun to see from him, but it was just kind of funny to see how active he was after the snap getting to his guys, right?
Yeah. Shout
But
out to Chris Cooper,
yeah,
offensive line coach. Christian Darrisaw is now the number one offensive lineman in the league, according to PFF. Brian O'Neill is the number one tackle, according to ESPN's pass block win rate. So, regardless of which analytics offensive line stat you like, the Vikings have the number one guy either way. Bradbury, top 10 grade. Ed Ingram is now a positively graded guard. And I think Ezra Cleveland might be top 10 too. So, you maybe, even if you don't like PFF, I think we can all agree, like, the starters are playing significantly
Yeah.
improved overall, and even the backups, Reisner, Oli Udo when he had to come in spot starts. I feel like the offensive line is, for so long we have been Vikings fans have just been so desperate for an offensive line, and this is the best they've been in a very long time. Maybe even better than like the John Sullivan days and Phil Oldholt days and the Adrian Peterson Russian Crown days, because this offensive line kicks a lot of butt and it's a lot
Yes,
of
they
fun to
do.
watch. And I feel like as much as you got to give credit to the players, but I feel like Chris Cooper is I don't think you see the improvement from Bradbury. I mean, Bradbury was almost a lost cause, and now he's playing like an elite center. Ed Ingram, the improvement this year. Darisaw, the leaps he's made. It's all very encouraging stuff. So I feel like you got to give a shout out to the coach in this instance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one last note on the offense, maybe a bit more of a negative note. Like the running game was not great in this game. I think it was kind of a similar to how the pressures happened. On run plays that failed, it was like one link that failed, right? And it's a different guy every single time. It's kind of one of those scenarios where it wasn't like, oh, we were clearly doing something wrong in terms of how we were calling the runs. It's just the execution wasn't there over 100% of the game. Like it started off really hot, right? You had that Mattison run. You had a couple of nice Mattison runs on the opening drive. Cam Akers had a 13-yard run on like the third drive of the game, I guess, right? On the third drive of the game. So there was definitely some positive stuff there, but on the whole, 21 carries for 74 yards. That's just over 3 yards per carry, 33% success rate, not great. But I do think I think the way the 49ers were playing defense led to them playing very successfully against the run, right? They're successful very forward as a defense, led to any like short behind the line of scrimmage stuff the Vikings tried to do pretty much didn't work against the Niners. Like a lot of the quick stuff was getting tackled quickly, but also led to the Vikings having a great downfield game on the offensive side of the ball, right? Like I think that the Vikings knew the 49ers were very aggressive coming forward. They failed when they tried to do quick stuff, but they exploited that on the back end, and is why they were so successful in the pass game by the same token. So I'm not worried about the run game moving forward necessarily. I want to get your take because I kind of ranted for a while on the pod last week. When you're solo, it's kind of easy to go just off on a tangent on something on Alexander Mattison, where I think Madison's playing fine. Honestly, a ton of people are calling for him to be benched for Cam Akers. In the Bears game, there was one major play I noticed where Mattison missed a read, and a bunch of people picked it up and were like, oh, we should bench him for Cam Akers. Well, in this game, when the Vikings were trying to run down the clock, Cam Akers missed the exact same read on kind of like a sweep play where one of his blockers, who's supposed to be pinning a guy down, got beat to the outside, and he really should have cut it back up, but instead he followed his blockers. Mattison missed that read last week. Akers missed that read this week. Do you have a take on the Mattison versus Akers? Do you feel like Mattison is performing subpar? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like Akers is maybe a little bit more explosive.
He
I
feels
feel
like he
like
has way more.
Madison,
He feels like he has more juice for 100%.
yeah, especially considering the big injuries he was coming off of. I kind of like, obviously Akers had like huge draft stock coming off
Mm-hmm.
into him, and but then the injury happened. Anytime a big Achilles injury happens, you wonder like, is he even going to be the same guy coming out? And man, he has a lot of juice. Like he looks like, sometimes I watch him run, I'm like, why did the Rams get rid of this guy? He looks like he can be pretty special. But at the same time, like I feel like you're right. There were multiple plays where it feels like it was a negative run or an unsuccessful run, and Akers was not doing himself any favors with his vision and the holes he was picking. I feel like Mattison is baseball analogy. He's like a singles guy. He's not going to hit for power. He's not going to get you home runs, but he will get on base. And he'll kind of like if you want if you want 5 yards, he'll get you 5 yards or whatever. But he's never going to get you 20 yards. And the
Yeah.
Vikings still don't have a 20-yard run this year yet. So
I
Madison
wanted to
opened it up
tweet
with
that
a
out so bad after the 19-yard run. Vikings still don't have a 20-yard run this season.
So yeah, I mean that he doesn't have the long speed for that, and I also feel like he's not as slippery through the hole or whatever. you watch Christian McCaffrey on the other side of the ball, and man, does that guy have everything? I mean, the patience, some of those runs
Oh
where
my
he
God,
would be
he's so
like
good.
inside zone and he would just dance behind there, and eventually he would find the bubble. I was like, man, it's so hard for a defense to maintain gap integrity that long. And he also but also like on wide zone, he'll stretch you and beat you to the edge super easily. And also like he's an elite receiver too. So special player, that guy. Yeah, Mattison is not that, and not he's several tiers below that. But he's still, in my opinion, he's a low end starting running back. He's totally fine to be your 1A and a running back by committee. Right now, I think the Vikings probably don't need to draft an offensive lineman for a very long time, and probably don't need to draft a receiver, tight end, or wide receiver for a very long time. So if they do want to eventually draft a quarterback, if they do want to draft a running back. When you look at like the draft needs for this team going forward long term, yeah, running back is definitely on the list. At the same time, it's not like so bad you have to force a pick or anything. I think Mattison is fine. I think he does deserve right now his job over over Akers. Part of that is I'm pretty confident in Mattison as a in all three phases. I know he had that drop that I just harped on him for, but like that's a little tough when you're asking him to line up as a wide receiver and know the rules about when to sit and go and mesh. But he doesn't drop the ball very often, despite that one. It's not really a drop because it was behind him, but he's consistent and he is reliable in pass pro. And he gets yardage after contact. He has good vision. He has good burst. I mean, that's kind of like a very good starting kit for like a solid running back. I understand why people don't love him. There's no flash to his play really, unless he's hurdling guys, which he hasn't done that much lately. But he's not like a splashy player, but he's consistent and reliable. I like him. Akers, I feel like is a perfect 1B. You know, he has some juice. I like using him on that screens. Ty Chandler, I feel like is the same way. Electric, but it's not going to be as consistent. I don't feel yet. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Akers to form a strong opinion on him. So if they do decide to move forward and give Akers more snaps, I feel like, yeah, I mean, he probably deserves a little bit more, but I also feel like Mattison doesn't deserve to get less snaps. So I don't know. I'm perfectly fine with Mattison. If they went into next season and they didn't get another running back, I would be perfectly fine with this running back stable. Would it be an above average running back stable? No, definitely not. But is it so bad that you need to invest in it to upgrade? I also feel like no, like Madison's fine, and I'm fine with the way he's going. And on tape, I feel like he's done enough to justify continuing to get lots of touches.
Yeah, I mean, some of the drops he's had this year have been rough. There's like individual pass protection reps that make it hard when I do believe Mattison is a great pass protector, right? But then people get stuck on individual plays that maybe aren't representative of what the player is as a whole, right? And I think that's happened quite a bit with Mattison so far this year. So I'm glad we kind of see it a little bit similarly there. Great news. We've spent 42 minutes on the Vikings offense, and we still have to cover the Vikings defense in this game. We still have to cover the Packers game coming up on Sunday. So buckle up, guys, because this is going to be a long one. But it's a fun one because there was just so much exciting stuff to talk about this 49ers game. This was always going to happen. I think you knew that coming in. So let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball. The first thing I want to do is shout out a strategic thing the Vikings did, and then also talk about their run defense in general, right? There's been a lot of talk I've seen today about the Vikings personnel usage in this game. Ivan Pace only got 12 snaps. That's because the Vikings played a lot of 5-1-5, by which I mean 5 down defensive linemen, counting, Hunter and Bynum as defensive linemen, or Patrick Jones, whatever, even though they're technically outside linebackers per the roster or whatever. They played some dime in there. They mixed some dime stuff in there too with, I think it was a 4-1-5 in the dime, right? If I'm not mistaken, a lot of the time. And I think ultimately that was because, of the unique challenges the 49ers present. Like one of the things with the 49ers is positional versatility. Kittle is such a good receiver, right? Kyle Juszczyk is so useful in multiple different ways he can receive. Christian McCaffrey is such a weapon when you split him out wide that you kind of need to play every snap with 5 defensive backs against this 49ers offense, right? Because they're so effective. But at the same time, they're incredibly effective running the ball because all of those guys are great blockers and the receivers are great blockers. So instead of countering that with a 4-2-5, right, where you have only 4 down defensive linemen to help stop the run, and you have those 2 linebackers who can get washed out by double teams, you put 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, and it puts a lot more stress on the 49ers offensive line to be able to make those blocks. And I thought the Vikings interior defenders did a great job of preventing any significant gains from the run, right? Christian McCaffrey's largest gain on the ground was 9 yards. Now, the 49ers did convert a lot of third and shorts, and they were pretty successful, I would say, running the ball in general, but I think the Vikings really helped limit any explosives from the 49ers run game, which we know is very, very explosive in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and those odd fronts are great at stopping zone scheme running attacks, which is the Shanahan bread and butter. And it also allows you to have numbers advantages in coverage. Obviously, you're not going to have the second level defenders, but when you have like the first level defenders who can play the run and be able to prevent the guys from comboing and climbing, which is exactly what these interior defensive linemen did. It allows you to be very effective against the run and kind of made the 49ers offense a little bit more one-dimensional. And that's Shanahan is so good at designing rushing attacks that know exactly how to exploit you, and they throw George Kittle jet sweep, a little a wind back with multiple jet motion guys. The crazy things he throws at you in addition to just the bread and butter wide zone stuff that he'll kill you with because everybody is so good. And even like the 15 on the other side, so good blocking downfield and stuff. It takes a lot, but to be able to hold McCaffrey to 3 yards per carry, to hold the 49ers to 3 yards per carry, and that includes a couple, a 17-yard Brock Purdy scramble, that was really impressive. But you really got to shout out the individual defensive performances. I mean, I've been singing Harrison Phillips praises every single week because he's such a phenomenal glue guy. I thought Dean Lowry had a really good game against some very tough double teams, and I think he actually also had the pressure that led to one of the Brock Purdy interceptions late in the game. And I think Bullard also had a really good game.
Yeah.
Jacqueline Roy had a couple really impressive snaps. He was a little more inconsistent. I feel like the touchdown they punched in on the short yardage run with Christian McCaffrey was maybe a little bit on Roy. Actually, I think that might have been Tonga. But
I had that on
stars,
Tonga,
Lowry,
yeah. Yeah, it was on Tonga.
yeah, those 3 stars in Lowry, Bullard, and Phillips, I thought all were phenomenal up front. And 49ers got a good offensive line.
Yeah.
So shout out to those guys.
Well, actually, I looked it up. Roy only played 2 snaps. I think Tonga played 5. Or maybe I have that backwards, where Roy played 5 and Tonga played 2. Because Roy flashed like twice. I was like, oh, he got some good run in this game. Apparently, those were the only 2 plays he was in on the game. But he did a really good job on those 2 plays. One, he got great backfield penetration against the center and made the play. Bullard also made the stop there. Harrison Phillips, to your point, there was one play where he just did a masterful job of taking on a double team, and Josh Metellus had an absolutely free run at it. That was great. Bullard on that play really compressed it. I thought that was a great team run defense from the Vikings on that. I think Caleb Evans was the one who made the tackle, inserting as a cornerback right into the play. Lowry had a couple good reps against double teams, to your point. Bullard, I thought, was kind of the star of the run defense from the defensive lineman, which was great for him. The Vikings interior does not offer great pass rush for sure, but they do offer extremely stout run defense. And given what Flores is able to do with the blitzes and what he wants to do philosophically with the blitzes, I'm fine with that trade-off. Like, I mean, first of all, it's great to have a strong interior pass rusher. Many teams in the league have good interior pass rushers. It's never going to be a negative thing to have that. But I'm okay with maybe having a lesser investment on that interior of the defensive line in this Flores defense because we do so much to create pressure elsewhere. So, that's kind of the trade-off that I'm fine with. I do want to give credit to the 49ers. They did a wonderful job designing short yardage. I mean, Kyle Shanahan throws some crazy stuff out there. Like, there was a screen where he motioned Juszczyk across, and Jennings, who's 15, ran a little slant route. So he runs off of Caleb Evans, who's the corner, comes back in and blocks the inside player. Meanwhile, Juszczyk is coming across in motion to go out and block Evans and seal him off, and it's a screen to Kittle, right? Where it's just like, man, how do you even come up with this stuff? Like, the defensive backs have no chance against that kind of action to try to be able to penetrate and make the play because you're hitting them at the exact right angles. And it's like, this guy is just great. Some of the run game design, the one McCaffrey one where it was kind of like they lined up like it was going to be a sneak and then they run with McCaffrey, but they put a ton of motion on it. Uh, just all what the 49ers do in the run game and short yardage, hats off to Kyle Shanahan in terms of being able to convert in those situations.
Yeah, I was a little bummed. They had the QB sneak that the Vikings were able to stop. Like the
Yes.
defensive lineman went low, and then I think Hicks came over the top, and they were able to stop. It was like 3rd and 1, but then the 49ers go ahead and they do 4th and 1. They convert it. So yeah, it was only 3 yards per carry, but it was an effective 3 yards per carry. But overall, very satisfied with a run defense against a very, very good 49ers rushing attack.
Yeah. So let's flip it over then to the pass defense. I do think the pass defense had a little bit of a rougher game. Like, you know,
Yeah.
we look at the 3 turnovers from the Vikings, which were great, and we look at what they score, 17 points in this game, and and that's not a lot of points, right? But just like we talked about the Vikings scoring like 6 of 8 drives, right? The 49ers only punted once. They had the 3 turnovers, but they scored on their other 3 drives. And it's not like they had the turnovers. Well, I guess the last one was kind of pretty quick, and it was a 2 minute drill anyway. It's not like they had the turnovers instantaneously, right? They got to the Vikings side of the line of the side of the field. They were in range to get a field goal, and they missed a field goal, right? So like there really were, I would say, a number of opportunities in scoring range for the 49ers, and they weren't able to convert. And I think it's a credit to the Vikings defense that they were able to get those turnovers. And I don't think it should necessarily have been taken away, because I think especially the second interception was a great design on the defense. But the 49ers got theirs, and they're a really talented offense that the Vikings had to go up against, right? There wasn't a ton of pressure. The pass protection was great. They had a great plan for picking up the blitzes. That center did a really good job of moving back across. There was one play on a Hawk blitz where Danielle Hunter should have been free, but Phillips tags the center, but he's still able to pass it off with the Phillips tag, right? He's still able to move over to his right and pass it off, and the guard gets out to Hunter. So I think that was really impressive from their offense. But just the passing game, like Ayuk got Murphy, he got Evans on a couple routes. Kittle got Metellus pretty bad, deep route and man coverage. There's some other designs from there. But I thought Purdy processed pretty well, too, out of the interception. So anything you want to talk about with the Vikings secondary?
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Kyle Shanahan, and he gets a lot of attention for the crazy things he does with the run scheme, but he's also very, very smart at knowing exactly how to attack offenses. I mean,
Yeah.
the second Christian McCaffrey touchdown against a cover zero look that ended up actually being cover zero, kind of just a perfectly designed call, and the way he used motion to set it up. So it was a McCaffrey bubble screen where McCaffrey motions to the 3 to the side, and so he's got like 2 wide receivers out in front blocking for him in the 3. And
Yeah.
because of the quick motion, Bynum or it wasn't Bynum,
It
was it? It
was
was
it was
Murphy who was a
Murphy
step
coming
behind.
all the way across the field. And the Vikings have killed screens. Like, the Vikings are dominant in screen defense. They are the number one team. It's probably not anymore after that one play busts it, but they were the number one team prior to this game in yards allowed on passes behind the line of scrimmage, because they know their opposing offenses are going to try to screen them to get death, right? And keep going, but credit to Kyle Shanahan for figuring out a unique way to get to that screen.
And just the motioning into it and knowing, okay, it's cover zero, so I'm going to have to get rid of the ball fast. But here's a way to use motion to get myself a numbers advantage. And then McCaffrey has a running start. Murphy's a step behind late to him, and Murphy just isn't able to get close enough and misses the tackle. And because the other 2 blockers are able to move Booth, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it might have been Bynum or whoever was the other person blocked out of the picture. McCaffrey's just a walk-in touchdown. So that, I mean, perfectly timed call, but also like perfectly designed call to beat the sort of zero looks that Flores throws at you. But there's a lot of like other little stuff. Like they did these play action designs that it was duo play action design, like a hard duo look that really pulled up the flat defender, and then they would run a little like underneath route to take advantage of the Flores loves these cover three looks, and so there's a lot of space underneath that deep look if you can
Yep.
clear it up with the play action pass. And they hit it. It was like a little like dinky little pass to the flat, but it would set up acres of space on like three times over the course of the game. And that was one way that like Shanahan did it. Another way he did is he was really good setting up glance routes basically. Whether RPO package with the run or
Yep.
not, just like little quick one step drop, boom, I'm hitting you on the short post and being able to pick up chunk gains that way. Flores had his wins too. The Vikings had their negative plays, but the 49ers were able to pretty consistently move the chains because Shanahan had kind of knew what Flores was able to do and was able to exploit it a little bit. And then they also had like some really strong man beaters, like the Kittle just like dusted Metellus on a long deep post. And they were able to get that down to
Yep.
him. I think that might have been the 49ers' biggest play of the game. So really impressive stuff. I mean, as complete as this game was, I'm a little bit more concerned with the coverage. I thought the coverage was discouraging. The pass rush, I will say, particularly Danielle Hunter, was like in Purdy's face all day, and I'm sad that he only had the one sack because I feel like Hunter could have been there. I forget how many pressures PFF charted him with, but when I looked at it, it was like Hunter got his hand on Purdy, like I don't know, almost in the double digits.
I think it was
Because he
6.
was
I
moving
think they
so
gave him 6
consistently.
pressures, from what I
Yeah,
saw.
and I feel like it should have been more
But
because there like PF there are times when like the ball comes out so quickly that PFF won't chart it as a pressure, or there are times when like Purdy actually I think has pretty good pocket presence, or he demonstrated that in
yes.
this game, and there are a number of times where Hunter beat his man and got to the point where Purdy was at the top of his drop, but Purdy shortened his drop back and climbed the pocket to the point where like it
Hmm.
doesn't really look like a pressure because Hunter doesn't get to the quarterback, but because Purdy is able to climb the pocket, it should have been a pressure if the quarterback finished his drop and just stayed there. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
really impressive pass rush from.
Hunter is doing his job in getting to his rush line, right? It's like they just didn't get the push that they needed. Purdy creation, I mean, Purdy in terms of timing, I thought was great in this game. In terms of the creation stuff, he was great in this game. I mean, I almost like was so upset when he threw that ball back across the field, and it was like you're like, oh man, that's gonna be a completion for big gain,
Crazy,
and he just didn't
crazy
have
to
the
even attempt.
arm to get it there. So that was kind of a lucky bailout, right? Uh, but really, really great stuff. One other play I wanted to shout out from Shanahan was like this inside screen to a tight end that it is not like an uncommon play, but it was in the red zone and got them down, and they eventually scored the touchdown on that drive. Literally, I was watching the all 22, and I was like, "Where did the ball go?" Like, I couldn't tell who got the ball initially. I was like,
That was Hunter had the same reaction because he saw that it was a screen and he did like a double
"Yeah,
take, being like, "But where's the running back?" And meanwhile, the tight end is running past him. So
yeah." It was like,
that's like
where,
the old Andy Reid
where
call him, like the
even
slip
was this
screen.
ball
But
from? The Danielle Hunter sack, by the way, freaking ruled. It was on drop 8, and he just completely dusts the right tackle inside. You know, he's actually the crasher on the stunt, but he's so quick that he gets by him. And the stunt helps him out because Pat Jones comes around, and Purdy, I think, sees the stunt coming around and knows he can't bail to Purdy. Purdy can't bail to his right? So he bails to his left, which is exactly where Hunter is for the sack. But still, it was like Hunter created it because Purdy knew he needed to get off of his spot because of the pressure coming up the middle from Hunter, and then the stump behind it, which theoretically Hunter was helping facilitate, push Purdy into Hunter's direction further. So that was a great sack. He's awesome. I hope he never leaves. I could not stomach trading him for multiple, for like 2 third-round picks and a fourth-round pick to give up the opportunity to extend him this offseason. Like, I just couldn't do it. I can't do it.
he's a very, very good player. Forget his PFF grades. I don't know what they're smoking this year, but like he's the best player on our defense by head and shoulders.
I don't
So,
get what their
do you want?
I don't get their Murphy grades either. Like, I think PFF does an okay job. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of PFF. I think they do an okay job. Their Murphy and Hunter grades are mind-boggling to me. I just don't like. I don't know how we're watching the same tape, guys. Doesn't make sense.
Most of the time, I feel like over the course of an entire season, things average out. There are some times when they're just kind of weird. I think their secondary grades are bad, especially in like the Flores defense. Like throw all the PFF Flores grade. Like Jordan Hicks being a top 10 linebacker. I'm sorry, but I like Jordan Hicks and he deserved his Player of the Week. Based on your counting stats or whatever. But like, some of these grades, you look at them, and you're like, I don't know. Ivan Pace with like a top 10 pass rush grade. Don't get me wrong, Ivan Pace is a good pass rusher, but like, I don't know.
Oh, Ivan Pace is an
Uh,
awesome blitzing linebacker. The thing is, Ivan Pace is a top 10 pass rush grade because running backs literally cannot block him, and the Vikings only get him blocked against running backs. So that's why he looks good,
exactly.
because of the competition adjustment. And credit to Ivan
You got
Pace
to keep up with.
because running backs can block a lot of linebackers, and they can't block him.
Yeah, exactly. You could like the whole Flores defense is like just goofy. We're gonna line everybody up 8 yards off and just wait until we match until somebody
Yeah.
like I don't know. I do not trust them to accurately chart whose fault it is in coverage, particularly with this Flores defense where he's throwing things at you where I'm not even sure if it's like man or zone. Like the most basic point, a lot of these routes, I'm
Or it's
like,
like,
I don't really know this cover three invert that you're doing. I don't know what this is.
yeah, or it's like
Fire
the
zone.
off man stuff in Hawk, right? Where we're sending the house. If the quarterback gets the ball on time and gets a short completion, like, good on them. That's the point of that defense. So you can't
Yeah.
downgrade people for allowing those completions, because literally they're just doing their job as long as they rally and tackle. Now, if they miss a tackle and it turns into a bust and a big play, like, that's a negative on that player. But allowing a completion in front of them in that situation is a negative. Anyway,
One guy in the secondary, I think we should shout out and was a very bright spot in this game and wound up with the NFL Player of the Week for the NFC was Cam
oh
Bynum. Do
yeah,
you
we
want to
saved the
walk
best for
through
last, by the way.
exactly? You want to walk through those two interceptions he pulled away?
Yeah, so the first play was really just a missed throw by Purdy, right? It's been covered by a couple people. I saw Brian Baldinger do a little video on it. I think it was Baldy. And he had said that he thought Jennings put a little bit of extra sauce on the route, or maybe that was live, where they said, where Aikman might have said, Jennings took a little bit long in the route. Watching it, Jennings takes one jab step to the outside to kind of sell a corner. I think that's a very reasonable thing for you to do in terms of an in-breaking route. And he's definitely not one step late. He's 2 or 3 steps behind where the ball goes. So I think
Way off, yeah.
I think Purdy just missed the throw too far inside, because there was a window to hit Jennings to the outside. Like, the only way Jennings gets to that spot is if he inside releases, and then he gives away that he's running to the inside, and Harrison Smith's underneath it. So I don't think there's a reasonable way for that. And Bynum's just middle of the field safety, watching the quarterback's eyes, and makes a diving interception. It's a great catch by him, but really a bad throw by the offense leads to an interception, right? And you put yourself in a position to make great plays. Like, Bynum earlier in the game had a play against Kittle where Kittle made a great contested catch, but Bynum was in position. It could have easily been a pass breakup if Kittle doesn't make a great contested catch. So it's like, I thought Bynum had a good day in coverage overall, and I thought he's been playing great this year. The second interception, I think, is a design thing from the Vikings, where they're playing cover 3 invert. So they start with like a 3 safety look to the middle of the field, and really more maybe of a Tampa 2 look, right? They've got Mattison as a safety. You've got 3 guys deep. It's kind of the collegey, like Iowa State type front 3 safety stuff, where you're just playing cover 3 from that deep to kind of give your guys some help on the back end. But what the Vikings love to do when they go into that look is run 3 invert or 3 double buzz, where both of the deep safeties, Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum, are coming forward. So Purdy reads it. He's like, okay, I've got either Tampa 2 or deep safeties, and it's a dagger concept by the offense, right? So you've got a vertical, seam route, post route, whatever, and a dig behind it. Purdy sees Josh Metellus, who's the middle player, go deep, and he thinks that space is vacated, and he has the dig. It's not vacated because Cam Bynum is coming forward. And I like this coverage. Like, I don't like a lot of the invert coverages that the Vikings run because it leaves a lot of open space in instances, and Purdy exploited that, I think, a couple times in this game. Especially on those quick glance routes where he's like, okay, this is the open space that we're going to get. I I do love Flores flipping up. So I'm not here saying, Brian Flores, you're dumb for running invert coverages, right? Like, I think probably we run too many of them, but I get why Flores is just trying to create chaos for the opposing offense, because that's what he does, because he's an insane person and I love him. Right? Like he's just the most aggressive defensive coordinator in the NFL by a far, like by a massive amount, and it's so much fun to watch, right? Uh but I love coming down in this situation because you're not worried about quick passes over the middle of the field when you're trying to run the clock out by making tackles on quick passes over the middle of the field, right? And let the offense check itself down to death. So Bynum coming from deep and coming forward to take away this dagger and make that interception, I think is just a great defensive architecture, and it's a great play by Bynum to make the play as well, as it's designed to read what the offensive is doing, understanding it, jumping the dig, and getting the win.
Yeah, really nice game from Bynum. Obviously, won the Player of the Week award. I also thought, in addition to the 2 interceptions, he's been good at this all year, but it continues to be good at fitting the run from depth. Really coming down and being able to
Yes.
make plays in space, being able to make secure those are really hard tackles to make when you're coming down at an angle. You have to be perfect with it because you're running very fast, and it's very easy to miss things when you're running
Mm-hmm.
that fast. He wraps guys up very well, and he doesn't allow a lot of times when your safety has to fit the run from depth. You're giving up big chunk plays. You usually don't want your
It's like,
safety, especially
yeah.
one who starts up pre-snap making the tackle, but he's able to do it and limit these gains to like 3 yards or something. So,
Well,
and he did that a couple times
I
on
think
Monday. So.
Flores has enabled him a little bit there, because last year, I mean, we were really upset with his run defense and the Donatel defense, right? And it's like 10 yards down the field is when he's making the tackles. But I love how freely he's playing, and he's making all these tackles within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, which is a borderline success from the offense, right? Like, it's not a run stop, but it's getting close, and it's just crazy that he's being able to do that from depth. Totally agree. Uh so with that, I think that wraps up the Vikings 49ers game. A lot of fun, invigorating win for the fan base, right? Like, now you kind of
Yes,
feel like
good
this
word.
team can do something, and to be able to do something, they need to take the next step and win the next football game against the Green Bay Packers, a team that really feels like it's kind of reeling right now, right? They got a couple wins early. you know the offense seemed to be clicking early on in the season, but really, was it just Matt LaFleur is a great play caller and he was carrying Jordan Love? Like, Jordan Love has not played well, I think, in the past couple weeks. I don't know how much you've caught of the Packers. I really haven't watched a ton of them outside of a red zone. So I did get a lot of that Packers Broncos game last week, and I'm not a huge Jordan Love fan based off of that experience. I don't know what your thoughts on Love are, Nick.
I mean, obviously, he's one of those toolsy guys who's got the
Yeah.
potential to beat you with his legs, beat you with his arm. He can make all the throws, but also right now he is making poor decisions and he is not processing things well or seeing the field well. And I have a lot of respect for Matt LaFleur and the way he's able to design things for his quarterbacks. But right now, I feel like um, the stat column is overstating how good Jordan Love is, and the stat column is not particularly complimentary either. So I don't know. Do you have any additional thoughts on Jordan Love?
No, I think I agree. The stat column's overrating him. Like, I don't think he's an accurate quarterback. I don't think he makes good decisions. I don't think he makes fast decisions.
No.
All three of those things are what I want my quarterback to do. So, like, if you need me to, and the fastest decisions thing for me has honestly been something I've evolved into more this year, is something I want my quarterback to do. Like, they need to be good and fast. Good and slow is not good enough. What was that Cam Jordan line over the offseason that was disparaging Kirk, right? But it's true. Like, you need to be good and fast as a quarterback, and then above it all, you need to be accurate, right? Because if you're not throwing the ball accurately, like, you're gonna throw picks. That's what the margin for error is. So, yeah, not a huge Love fan. We'll see how it continues to play out. Obviously, I am concerned about the Packers' offensive designs, but they've got a lot of young weapons as well, right? There's a lot of youth on that offense, and they really haven't put it all together. Hopefully, there's not some magical realization and they put it together this week, I think. And honestly, the Packers got gifted one of the 2 wins that they have. Like, that Saints game where Derek Carr went out and the Saints were up 17-0, and they just, like, completely turtled and fell apart as a team. Like, really, the Packers, in my opinion, should not have won that game either. So we'll flip it over to the offense. we gave LaFleur credit as a play caller. I've got a couple facts that I pulled up here, or stats I'll say that I pulled up here that I want to get out. Both the Vikings and the Packers are middle of pack in offensive EPA per play and in DVOA, which I find kind of interesting. Like the three things I look at as indicators for offense and defense, just very quick stuff: EPA per play, DVOA, and yards per play, which is close to DVOA but not quite. The Vikings notably are at 5.8 yards per play to the Packers 5.0. The Vikings are top 5 in terms of yards per play. The difference, I think, and what shows up and why they're even in EPA per play and DVOA is turnovers. The Vikings have 14 turnovers, which is second most in the league. I'm shocked that it's only second most, but the Raiders are garbage. And then the Packers only have 7 turnovers, so they literally have half as many turnovers. They're taking care of the ball a lot better. But the difference in the turnovers is all the fumbles, right? We've talked ad nauseum about how awful the Vikings have been fumbling the football this year, right? And that's not to say fumble luck, regression, whatever. Like, they still need to fix it, right? And we didn't fumble last week, so I guess that's a bit of an improvement. But, like, it's not guaranteed that it's going to go away and the Vikings are going to be good at this now. The Packers have lost 0 fumbles this season. They're the only team who hasn't lost a fumble this year. So that is something that I feel like is not sustainable for a team, right? All year not losing any fumbles. So that's very interesting, and I think that is the difference statistically. So I think you normalize the turnovers a little bit. The Vikings come out looking a lot better on offense than the Packers do.
Yeah, one thing I'll say for the Packers is they are pretty banged up. I mean, Watson missed half
Yep,
his game so far. Bakhtiari, I think, is he's
out
on
for the
IR. I
season,
don't
I
know if he's
think. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Uh, who they've got? Who else is on IR for them? They've got
Is Elton Jenkins playing
Darnell.
again?
Uh, Jenkins is, but he's
Okay.
he's having a bit of an off season. Savage is out on IR. Eric Stokes just got placed on IR, so like they're pretty banged up. I don't know. So that said, they have a lot of talent, and even if you say like, oh, Jenkins isn't playing well, Jair Alexander isn't playing as well. I mean, Jair Alexander, in my opinion, is in the conversation for. I mean, he's an elite cornerback in my opinion. I don't really care what his PFF grades say. So he's a really good player. Rashawn Gary is a tremendous pass rusher. Kind of a Danielle Hunter type, in that he just has all the tools in the world, the length, the speed, the explosion, the bend. So he's a really good player. Will be another really good test for Brian O'Neill if he lines up on the right side as he typically, or the left side, I guess, from his perspective. So they've got dudes. It's just a question of can Jordan Love execute? Which so far I think the answer has largely been no. And can the defense live up to all the talent on its defense? I feel like they've got a lot of good players. And right now it's just not really clicking. I feel like maybe this is a general comment on the NFL generally, but I feel like Fangio is kind of past its prime, the Fangio style. Like Packers are another one of those Fangio teams that like
Yeah.
it feels like now teams understand how to beat these quarters looks, how to beat these half field reads, design their play calls to take advantage. So will be interesting to see how they scheme things up. Jordan Love obviously is a very particular kind of quarterback who can beat you with his legs. But he's also like a slow processor, so I'm sure Flores will have a field day with that. But I'm also sure that Jordan Love is the kind of quarterback who, if you just play spot drop zones and make it obvious, he's gonna rifle passes in the dead spots, and he's also gonna has the ability to run for a lot of yards too. So Watson getting back, I mean they have a lot of speed too. So if you're running these kind of zero looks with Watson or Dobbs or whatever, you're going to see a lot of those shot plays. Whether Love can drop it in there the way Aaron Rodgers used to, probably not. But you're exposing yourself, I guess, to a little bit of the speed there which is not something they've had to, as good as like the 49ers receivers are, the Chargers were, you were not as worried about that speed element there with those receiving corps. So that's also something to keep in mind, particularly with the way that like Flores kind of likes to design his defense as he risks his. It's interesting that Flores has limited so many explosive plays on defense because it feels like a very
Yeah.
he's kind of gambling on defense too with the way and cover zero is like the epitome of this. Anytime you got 9 guys on the line of scrimmage, you're risking a bomb over the top of your head. I mean, that's what happened to what the Addison touchdown at halftime was. The 49ers were in a zero look, and there wasn't anybody to help on the post route. So Yeah, that's something that I would worry about a little bit on this offense. As much as it's struggling, I feel like they have pieces to make me worried a lot about a few things too. And the fact that it's in Green Bay, that's going to be a big advantage for the Packers. I do feel like betting markets have the Packers as a slight favorite by like 1 point or something. So kind of a coin toss, but tie goes to the home team. So this as good as this 49ers win was, as encouraging as it was, it's one game of the season. We also
Hmm.
saw them look absolutely putrid despite the win in Chicago. So
Yes.
it will take them keeping up all this momentum and all the good things going forward and fixing some of the coverage woes and the other busts from the game. So that's kind of how I feel about the Packers. I'm not despite them stumbling, I still have a lot of respect for the talent on that team and feel like it's not going to be any division game is always going to be a slog. So
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, just to wrap it up a little bit on the defense, like they have always had this talent. It feels like every year we're talking about, can the Packers take the next step as a defense with all the talent? I mean, I think that's probably a Joe Barry, their defensive coordinator, problem a little bit there, that they really haven't stepped up. Just one thing I pulled up, I talked about the offensive stuff. Vikings similar in terms of yards per play allowed, similar in terms of EPA per play to the Packers defense. The Packers Vikings are middle of the pack in defensive DVOA. The Packers are near the bottom of the NFL. I think that's because they played an extremely weak schedule, and that's the difference between DVOA and the other stuff. They play the Bears, Falcons, Saints, Raiders, Broncos. All of those offenses are funky and pretty bad in general. Like the Falcons actually does some nice things, except they don't use any of their cool players, and Desmond Ridder isn't a good quarterback, so it's kind of a weird situation there. But I think the problem is, to your point, they have a lot of talent, and that talent has shown up and decimated the Vikings in the past, right? Like the game at the end of the year last year, it's just like, if we get Kenny Clark winning on the inside, Rashawn Gary getting pressure on Kirk, and Kirk kind of turtles and plays conservative, which is the exact opposite of how he played in the 49ers game, right? But it's not like we haven't seen Kirk flip from one to the other throughout the course of the season. If Jair Alexander is able to shut down Jordan Addison and the other guys aren't able to get open, there can definitely be issues with this offense against that defense. And the Packers offense can do enough to win the football game, especially from the design side of things. One final thing I want to get to, I think you raise a very good point that the Flores defense has been interesting, of how quick passing and short stuff or how short, like long drives we forced opposing offenses to get to, because it's kind of the opposite of what I expected. I was kind of thinking of the Zimmer defense, where it's like, if we get them in 3rd and 5 or whatever, if we get them in 3rd and 4 plus, it's over, because Zimmer's going to bring crazy stuff on 3rd down. I wouldn't say that's exactly been the case for Flores. Like, I think opposing offenses have converted 3rd down a pretty decent amount of the time. And I've been workshopping this take a little bit, because it's not 1-to-1. It's kind of funny that the Vikings, are running the face of the Vikings defense is the complete opposite of what it was last year, right? It's all this aggression. It's all these guys on the line of scrimmage. It's middle of field closed all the time, as opposed to middle of field open from the previous defense. And yet the results are the same, with these opposing offenses dinking and dunking down the field on it. And it's just kind of how you get there, where Flores limits your options overall from what you can do pre-snap. So you have to run these quick hitting plays, right? He's pre-snap dictating to you what you can do as an offense. And hey, if you want to take deep shots one-on-one down the field, that's fine, but we're going to be prepared to cover those deep shots one-on-one down the field, and they're just going to have to be fades that you're throwing. Whereas the Fangio defense was saying, yeah, we're just not going to cover anybody, really, ultimately. But no, we're gonna let you try to take downfield shots. We're gonna stop those downfield shots, and you're just gonna check down. But we're not gonna have a good answer for when you check down. So that was kind of the issue with the Donatel defense last year. So it is kind of interesting how they've approached similar results from completely opposite directions. I think the Flores defense has a lot of potential to get better throughout the year, whereas the Donatel defense got a lot worse throughout the year last year, right? But it is an interesting dichotomy there, right? Of how it's kind of the opposite we expected. Like, big sacks, big explosive plays from the Vikings defense is what I think I expected this year, and it's really not what we're getting. It's more the occasional sack, but a lot of dinking and dunking down the field.
Surprising consistency. I think part of it is just the forcing quick time to throw from opposing offenses. I mean, this was kind of the Justin Herbert thing,
Yeah.
getting the ball out very, very quickly, and that allows teams to sort of like dink and dunk in ways that it's a weird way. Like you limit explosives by getting to the quarterback before the wide receiver can run far downfield fast
Yeah.
enough. So,
No, which
interesting strategy.
actually, that strategy is why I think we match up well against the Packers, because I don't think Love is processing the game quickly. And it's like the two teams our defense was best against, Panthers and the Bears, those quarterbacks were not processing quickly, right? They're not able to get it out against the blitz. So I think this is a heavy blitz game where we force Love to process, and I don't think he's really able to do it.
Cross your fingers. I actually looked it up, and the Vikings are actually favored by a point instead of the Packers favored by a point, even with a home field advantage. So doesn't mean a lot, but it translates to a 55% win probability for the Vikings as opposed to the Packers. So that's something. I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. With all that, I think we're going to get out of here. Nick, this was so much fun. I'm glad we got
Really
to be
good
able
win
to
break.
cover this in the detail that we wanted to. So, anything parting before we get out of here?
Hopefully, just shout out to Christian Darrisaw, because when you watch the All-22 for these games, sometimes it can be a bit of a grind, but he is consistently the most fun player to watch. So I'm so happy that he's finally getting like some recognition from like PFF and the national media, because he is like, don't get me wrong, like Brian O'Neill's an absolute stud, but he's kind of a boring stud, you know, like he wins, but he wins in a very like he gets in front of the guy and he recovers very well and effectively. Darrisaw, like I've never seen so many pancakes in pass protection from anybody. It's crazy. Like pass protection, you're supposed to be passive, but like Darrisaw is just like shoving dudes on the ground constantly, nonstop, on whether it's play action or whether it's like a long drop or whether it's a jump set. He's just always a lot of fun to watch. So just he's part of the reason, like when I get the All-22 and I'm like slammed with work and I'm like, do I go to the gym today or do I watch the All-22? Like the ability to watch Darrisaw beat dudes into the ground
Yeah.
makes it worth it and makes it fun. So shout out to him.
No, it's like he's so amazing because I feel like he's just standing in place and doing all of these things from a standstill. Like he's actually a great athlete and moves very well, but I don't know, he has so much natural power. It looks like he doesn't have to exert any effort at all to do what he's doing. So that is great. With that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. I'm Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. He's Nick Olson. You can find him at Nick Olson NFL. Our co-host at You've Been Gregged is Greg Blake. You can find us at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. The podcast's available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also on YouTube. And Skull Vikings.
Check out Matt's article on zone coverage.
Yeah, that too.
In all his glory. And also, if you haven't already, watch JT O'Sullivan's YouTube channel on Kirk as well, on the QB School. You'll learn a lot, always from JT's videos, but that's an especially fun one to deep dive. So if you want some extra credit, you want some homework, those are both really good resources for you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Okay, with that, goodbye. We love you.
Skull.
Go, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score.